My talk is the role of philosophy in cognitive science, mechanistic explanation, normativity, and generality. I claim that philosophy can be a most valuable contributor to cognitive science. It can do this by exploring the category of mechanistic explanation on two grounds, generality and normativity. There is a new mechanistic philosophy that I call it an emerging school. These new mechanistic philosophers would study actual lines of research in the cognitive and other sciences to develop accounts of how science itself works. This is generality. And these accounts in turn may support normative prescription for further research in cognitive science, normativity. That emerging school is exactly related to the people that we call them philosophers of science, of course. But most engaged philosophers in cognitive science have their roots in philosophy of minds. I'm not talking about them today. A smaller number have their roots in the philosophy of science like William Bechtel, Andrew Brooke, Karl Craver, Paul Taggart, that they are famous, perhaps you know them. I'm supporting, exploring, and developing the account of these people. Well, what is cognitive science? Of course, you are familiar with the definition of cognitive science, but I have three very simple definitions about that. The interdisciplinary study of mind and intelligence, the study of cognitive process involved in the acquisition, representation, and use of human knowledge. But I myself prefer the last one, the scientific study of the mind, the brain, and intelligent behavior, whether in humans, animals, machines, or the abstracts. George Miller is a key thinker or the key founder of the cognitive science. And he somehow is talking about 1950s. But really, the world of cognitive science is going to public by two books, one by the Rumelhart and the other one by Bob Rowe. That was a computer scientist in that time. They used that cognitive science word. But he is going to put the philosophy where I see this is the George Miller storyteller about this cognitive science. I see psychology, linguistics, and computer science as central, the other three disciplines as peripheral. Even he doesn't name the philosophy. The Sloan Foundation was a foundation that they put more than $17 million as a budget for cognitive studies. And the University of California at San Diego was the first one that they grant the first part of that foundation. What are the mechanistic explanations in cognitive science? We believe that the dominant form of explanation in cognitive science is mechanistic explanation. The reason cognitive scientists prefer to use mechanistic explanation is that it has found widespread application in many areas of cognitive science. It doesn't matter if it is psychology or it is computer science. Two examples I have over here by William Bechtel, Looking Down, Around, and Up, Mechanistic Explanation in Psychology. This is one of his good paper. By looking down, he means decomposing the parts and operations. By looking around, it means go to other mechanisms and see what is around of those mechanisms that you are focusing. And by looking up, his idea is back and situate the mechanism in the environment of that mechanism. Means put it in the context of that mechanism. Karl Craver is another one of these mechanistic philosophers. In his 2007 work, the name is Explaining the Brain, he develops a framework for thinking about the norms of scientific explanation in physiological sciences such as neuroscience. Of course, there are some other examples that I put it in the next slide. The relation among and between the disciplines. Mechanistic explanations are philosophically problematic. we need philosophical analysis to elucidate them, especially with regards to generality and normativity, that they look like the two wings for the mechanistic philosophers. I said a contrary view, but I have two examples over here. Is the philosophy of mechanism philosophy enough? This is the name of the paper, the title of the paper by Lenny Moss, that he said in his paper, he argued that this view is not a new normative explanatory gold standard, because he informs us in actual biological practice, mechanism means different things in different contexts. We will see how he is right. And the other one is Bert Luridan. He's another serious critic in his paper. The name of the paper is Can Mechanism Really Replace Laws of Nature? That's a very long paper, about 23 pages, but there is another long discussion by Karl Kraber that he replied is criticizing, and he called this paper that it is uncharitable caricature of the whole literature about the mechanism. Explanation in cognitive science. The practitioners of the various cognitive science generally construe themselves as engaged in explaining the behavior of human agents. This raises the question, what sort of explanation suffices to explain behavior? One of the most perhaps famous answer is deductive neurological model, or as you know, it is famous to DN model. A major legacy of the attempts by the positivists, you know the logical positivists, they come out from the Vienna Circle, most of them, even more than most of them. To use logic to articulate the structure of science is the deductive neurological model of explanation. On this view, laws of nature are central to explanation. DN account is unable, this is why the mechanistic philosophers is going to put mechanism instead of the DN account or DN model. DN account is unable to characterize properly the explanations biologists and cognitive scientists offer. The central problem with applying the DN account to research in cognitive science is the paucity. It's too little of acknowledged laws within the fields of cognitive science. This is one reason. And what's the solution? We say the solution is mechanistic explanation. Focusing on mechanism rather than laws transforms discussion of many basic issues in philosophy of science and relatively in philosophy of mind. First, explanation within the DN model relied on linguistics and mathematical representations, both stating laws and initial conditions. But mechanisms are often represented diagrammatically or even modeled physically. Advantages of mechanistic explanation here, another one. Reasoning about a mechanism often takes the form of simulating its operation, physically, mentally, or computational, not drawing logical inferences. Perhaps the third one would be DN explanations are inherently general insofar as laws are universally quantified statements, but accounts of mechanism is not like that. They are often developed by studying specific instances and generalizing such accounts to other instances. The last advantage of mechanistic explanation would be, while philosophers are poorly equipped to investigate the discovery of laws, they are able to identify a variety of research strategy for discovering mechanisms, making scientific discovery once again a prominent topic in philosophy of science. Lyndon Darden, William Bechtel. Given these and other substantial differences, mechanistic explanation is increasingly recognized as radically different from DN explanation. Okay, but what are the mechanisms? Peter Macomber, Lyndon Darden, and Karl Kraber, they have a very good, I think, paper. The name of Thinking About Mechanisms, the year is 2000. But they are not the pioneer. The pioneer would be William Bechtel. But why I use this first, I will let you know, because it is the most famous paper about the mechanistic philosophy. Mechanisms are entities and activities organized such that they are productive of regular changes from start or setup to finish or termination conditions. Normally, they call this MDC. If we refer to this, we say MDC again. And by Bechtel, I didn't use the Bechtel 1993 paper about the mechanisms. This is better for his idea is changed a little bit about the definition of the mechanism. Then I used that. But about 12 years before that, he wrote another paper. Then, because of that, I said he's the pioneer. A mechanism is a structure performing a function in virtue of its components, parts, component operations, and their organization. The orchestrated functioning of the mechanism is responsible for one or more phenomena. But when we say mechanism, we are not talking all kind of mechanism. We are not talking about the biological mechanism. We are not talking about the neurobiology. But we are here just about talking about cognitive mechanisms. And what are they? Cognitive mechanisms are distinguished from the mechanisms invoked in other domains of biology by invoking the processing of information. Then we can say cognitive mechanisms are commonly characterized as information processing mechanism. How can philosophy contribute to cognitive science? We talked about two things. One, generality, and second, normativity. Generality is especially crucial for cognitive science to address questions, general questions, that crisscross areas of investigation, thereby helping to unify what otherwise appear to be diverse approaches to understanding mind and intelligence. Some of these questions would be, what is an explanation? What is a theory, or what is a good theory? What is the relation between different fields such as neuroscience and psychology? That there is no time, but perhaps we can say that mechanistic philosophy and even that philosophy of science would be a bridge between psychology and neuroscience. By that paper that we had it about 2 minutes ago by Bechtel, he exactly is going to prove that philosophy would be a bridge between neuroscience and psychology. But by psychology, we mean cognitive psychology and, of course, cognitive neuroscience. And the normativity. There is lots of work for philosophers to do on ethical issues. That this is not our issue here. Normative questions are not limited to ethics. Philosophy of science also concerns itself with norms, especially the part that studies knowledge. Such things as norms for good evidence, for warrant, for adequacy of theories, for good explanations, and so on. There are many of these questions listed by Paul Taggart in his paper, and also there are many others by Andrew Brook in his paper. This is what I promised about more example about what the mechanistic philosophers they did. The exchange of contribution between new mechanistic philosophy and cognitive sciences already started. You had two examples before, and there are more over here. For example, Taggart, Paul Taggart, has collaborated with psychologists and artificial intelligence researchers in the investigation of induction. Ms. Nancy Nersessian shows how cognitive science research on mental models can be extended to understand the development of scientific models. And Gear has applied cognitive science analysis of distributed cognition to large-scale physics projects. Another work of Bechtel is very nice about the psychology, and also again neuroscience is on vision and memory. And again, from Bechtel, circadian rhythm research as an exemplar, and his work also generalization and discovery through conserved mechanisms. And I hope this is not a big conclusion. If cognitive science is all about understanding the human mind, or if cognitive science is the interdisciplinary investigation of mind and intelligence, since the whole life of philosophy was involving with the base of knowing, epistemology, and conceptions of reality, metaphysics. Also, philosophy has considered the so-called mind-body, is better for me to say mind-brain problem, identity theory, functionalism, and heuristic identity theory. Then philosophy could be a most valuable contributor in cognitive science. Remember, I had a lecture about 2 years ago in Delft University. In that time, it was the misappreciation between philosophy and science. I told some quotation from Richard Feynman, that you know, who is a very famous physicist. Not that one about the bird and ornithology. It's about, he says, all the scientists are explorers, but philosophers are tourists. The other one is about, in a grand theory, Stephen Hawking. It is the last compliment for all of you as the philosophers. He says, philosophy is waste of time, and philosophers are waste of space. This is the last conclusion. I did this because there are many scientists in all over the world that they really think like that about the philosophers. And thank you, and thanks to my supervisor, Dr. James McAllister at Leiden University. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You finished in time. So we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah. Yes.
What will you think would be the best approach to sort of enhance our status among scientists, or to be taken seriously by scientists? What would be, I mean, obviously Hawking, I mean, he can't be convinced, but many, I really do think that many scientists, many cognitive neuroscientists, actually I know this from experience, can be convinced of the relevance of philosophy, even though they're very skeptical at first. What do you think is the best strategy?
Yeah, it's a very good question, really, and a very strategic question. I lonely cannot answer this question, but my suggestion was exactly presented in that lecture also. We need a lot of relation between the science and philosophy nowadays. From 25 years ago till now, there are many special philosophy of science. Philosophy of physics, philosophy of biology, philosophy of neuroscience, and then it is very helpful and useful. This is one way. The other way is related to the budget. We talked about this matter at Leiden University, and no result. Every day the budget is going down, and then there's no money to put on somehow philosophy researchers. But there is another opportunity. That last opportunity is, I think there is a big fault by you and me as the philosophers. That problem is that why we are not going to any kind of class of neuroscience. Many of them, they are free of charge. Why we are not going to laboratories? Why you are going to accept that kind of acquisition, that armchair, you know, always you are comfortable and just you are writing? No, it's not true. Paul Chagard, William Bechtel, many others, Andrew Brook, Carl Kraber, they really prove that it is another possibility. You can go to the laboratory of the scientist and see everything by your eyes, calculate. Why we don't need mathematics? Why we are just here and say a lot of things about analytic? This is exactly that I'm going to say. There are many other philosophy styles that, for example, postmodernism. Is that fit for the cognitive science? No. Are we talking about any kind of Gilles Deleuze or Jacques Derrida? Are they good? Yeah, I like them very much, but they are not good and they are not fit for the cognitive science. Are we talking about Plato, Kant? No. That rationalism is out of cognitive science. Are we talking about any kind of even analytic philosophy, Frege, Dummett? No, not at all. I'm talking about the new emerging philosophers that really they showed us already that we can go to laboratories. and touch everything.